Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, R&D Tax Claims Post-Merge Scheme, Data Insights from the Front Line. Just quickly, for those of you who don't know us or don't know us very well, we are WhisperClaims, R&D tax preparation software used by accountants and advisors, specialist advisors across the UK. So a slightly different topic area for us today, not legislative updates or best practice, which is our usual topic kind of area. Just to give you some context, we sit behind thousands of claims prepared by firms rather than preparing claims ourselves. We've had, therefore, a unique view of how claim preparation has been evolving really over the past 7 to 8 years through legislative changes, through increased HMRC scrutiny, the introduction of the additional information form, and most recently the merge scheme. So today's webinar draws on data from more than 2,500 claims prepared using WhisperClaims between the dates of around April 2022 and March 26, alongside a more detailed review of claims prepared during the first full year of the merged scheme. So this isn't intended to be a definitive picture of the entire market. However, many of the trends that we've identified closely mirror HMRC's published statistics. And while others raised some interesting questions about advisor behaviour and how firms have been adapting, we've been sort of curious about this. And so what today is really about is the data can tell us what's happened, but it can't tell us why. And we want to present these statistics to help us and you understand what this might all tell us about the current state of the R&D tax market, and also give you the opportunity to compare your own experiences against some of the trends that we're seeing emerge. So, are claims taking everyone longer to prepare? Are firms becoming more selective? Has confidence really changed? These are some of the questions that we'll be exploring together today. And to help us do that, we'd love your participation in a few audience polls throughout the session. So please do join in if you feel you can. As I've just said, the data shows us patterns. Your responses today are hopefully going to help us understand whether our interpretation of these patterns is reasonable. With that, I'm going to hand over to Jen to take us through the agenda and kick us off, and then we'll launch our first poll and get into the meat and bones. Thanks, Jen. Hiya.
Cool. Thanks, Suze. Yes, so Suze says, obviously, this will be pulling on a lot of data that we can take out from the app, completely anonymized, just for any of our clients that are on this call. And just looking at, the trends. So we had our instructions. So the first thing we're going to look at is comparing. We'll do an overall view of ERIS claims versus RDEC claims. So looking at what the major differences between those two sets of claims are, what that means for the merge scheme itself. We're then going to look, and actually for me, this is the more interesting part, but I'm a stats nerd, looking at actually how things have changed over the last 4 years as we've gone from pre-merge scheme claims into merge scheme claims, and how that has affected things like time taken to prepare, number of projects included, all that kind of thing. We'll have a quick talk about conclusions, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. And as Sue says, there'll be several polls throughout, just to get your take on it as we go through. So hopefully it should be really interesting, everyone. As I say, I find it really interesting because I'm a stats nerd, so I'll be excited by it anyway. So I think Suze is just going to put up our first poll just to get a general kind of take the temperature of the room, see how people have been feeling about doing R&D.
Yeah, so hopefully the polls are going to launch. It's always a bit of a scary thing. There you go. Hopefully you can see that, Jen.
Yes.
Okay, so the first poll is really just, again, to test the water and talk about confidence, really. So compared to the last 3 years or so, how confident do you feel preparing R&D tax claims today? And there is a question too, based on, that first question is, what's been the biggest impact on your confidence? And I have to say that there's been a slight assumption there that confidence is maybe a bit lower, and that's from our direct kind of conversations that we've had with accountants and advisors within the sector in the last couple of years. Confidence from advisor side, but also confidence from claimants as well. Like we're finding that our clients have had a bit of a, lost a bit of confidence in moving forward to have a claim prepared on their behalf. So really interesting to see what you're all saying here. We'll just give it 10 seconds or so just to let everybody answer those questions. So have a little look at what we're seeing here. So straight away, Jen, I don't know if you want to jump in, but straight away, I'm interested in that first.
Yeah. So that is, I don't know if you want to end the polls with, yeah. So that is interesting for me. Obviously, we've got people who are actually saying they're more confident than 3 years ago, which is awesome to see that people are kind of growing in confidence through this. A lot of people about the same, which is also really good to see, and quite a few people less confident. I think when we set up this question, we were actually expecting to see a lot of people feeling less confident. So it's really good that people are kind of maintaining or building confidence in producing R&D claims over time. I would say that it's a self-selecting group that we're talking to here. So the people that we've seen a huge drop off in people even doing and preparing R&D claims. Those people wouldn't be on this webinar. So we are speaking to a group of people that really are interested in R&D and are doing claims. But it is really cheering for us to see that kind of increase in confidence with people. And I'm not at all surprised at what it is that has impacted people's confidence. Obviously, far and away is HMRC's compliance activity. And that makes sense because that's the thing you can control least. Obviously, you can go out there, you can study the legislative changes, you can look at the new guidance, you can use systems like WhisperClaims that will help you through all of the changes. But what you can't ever do is protect completely against HMRC's compliance activity. And it has had a huge impact. And obviously, the way the HMRC have gone about that has really knocked people's confidence. It's been obviously more difficult than ever to convince HMRC of the validity of claims, even where they are rock solid. So it makes perfect sense.
Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Right, I'm gonna jump into my first bit. So obviously, I think Susan's covered most of this, but just to kind of why did we decide to do this? I think it's been hard to predict the impact of the merge scheme, how that's going to affect behaviour, number of claims, all that kind of thing. And obviously, for you guys on this call, so claimant companies and their advisors don't have any baseline with merge scheme claims. You can guess that it might be the same as pre-merge scheme, but it's hard to know what the changes are, what that would look like. Obviously, HMRC statistics don't come out till September, so we're still waiting. We don't have any data from HMRC at all on the sort of ERIS RDEC split, all that kind of thing, because last year's stats had nothing on those. And fundamentally, we realised that we can give actually richer data than HMRC. HMRC don't record things like the number of projects within a claim, the time it took, and sort of other bits and pieces that we can pick up from the claims that go through our system that HMRC wouldn't publish. And also it's fun. Like everyone loves a good look at stats, or I'm assuming that everyone that's on this call likes a good look at stats. So it was a way to kind of share our experience with people and help you build that baseline and understand a bit more as we await HMRC's next set of stats. So just a quick kind of basics. So looking at the merge scheme data, we drew data from 171 claims produced by 43 different firms. So we're not looking, it's quite a widespread across our client base. I didn't do any kind of data normalization, anything like that. Nothing was excluded. So that was all of the kind of merge scheme claims we've seen come through so far. I will say that's a lower number than we would expect to see by this point, which does suggest people have taken their time to do these claims in a way that they wouldn't have if they were pre-merge scheme claims. And that's obviously a reflection of it being a new system, new rules, everything like that. Everyone's had to kind of learn some to do things differently. And the main thing of notes right now is that we are seeing 77% of these claims are RDEC and only 23% is ERIS. So again, the ERIS criteria are quite strict. You have to be loss making. You have to obviously meet that 30% R&D intensity criteria. So we are seeing actually quite a low percentage of claims going through that scheme. This might change. I'll show you some more stats about ERIS claims in a little while, which could impact the number of claims going through ERIS because they are, from the look of it, more complicated to pull together. The kind of second half of this, as I said, I'm going to be looking at pre-merged versus merged and how things have changed over the last few years. So this obviously is a huge number more claims. We've got 2,413 claims that we'll be looking at in this, and they're from 246 different advisory firms. So again, spread across a large number of companies. So we shouldn't see too much bias within the data to one geographical location, one particular sector, anything like that. They're nice and widely spread. We do obviously, WhisperClaims was fundamentally built for smaller claims. So we have a slightly higher percentage of SME versus RDEC, traditionally just because of the nature of our clients. So the claims we're looking at is 90% SME, 3% RDEC, and then 6% SMEs claiming through RDEC or some kind of mixed claim where they've probably had grants or subcontracting arrangements, that kind of thing. So as I say, it's a bit higher than the overall average percentage from HMRC, and that's just a reflection of the nature of our client base. So if we're looking at what does an average claim look like before we dive into the actual data, for a pre-merge scheme claim, an average claim is made through the SME scheme, has qualifying expenditure of just under £270,000, contains 2.1 detailed project write-ups, takes about a week to prepare, and we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by time taken to prepare, and is made by a tech company based in the Southeast. So you can decide on whether or not that reflects your kind of average experience, but overall, that's an average pre-merge scheme claim that went through WhisperClaims. Through the merge scheme, an average claim is made through RDEC. Has a qualifying expenditure of just over 270k. So just initial thing there, we're not seeing a huge jump in qualifying expenditure from pre-merged to merged. It contains 2.7 detailed project write-ups, so they're bigger claims with more projects in them. They take 2 weeks to prepare. So again, that's reflecting what I said about there's fewer claims that had come through by the end of March than we would have expected to see, but they are taking long to prepare, and they're made by a tech company based in London. So again, we're not seeing a huge change from pre-merge to merge. We're not seeing a huge difference in sector, a huge difference in geographical location, anything like that. And I'll go into all of these in more detail. But generally speaking, that's the kind of claims we're seeing, and there hasn't been a huge change from one set of rules to the other. Okay, I'm trying to remember. I feel like I've maybe missed a poll, but I don't think I have. I think the next one's coming later. So first of all, we're going to look a little bit in more detail at what is the difference between an RDEC claim and an ERIS claim overall. So first big difference we noticed was, much as I said that for a merged scheme claim overall, the average R&D expenditure is at just over £270,000. What we actually saw was much, much higher expenditure in ERIS claims than the new RDEC claims. So we're looking at, multiples higher, sort of two and a bit times higher. There's lots of things this could be. Obviously, the key thing you have to remember is that ERIS claims are made by companies that are R&D intensive. So much as they're potentially smaller companies, they're at an earlier stage, any company could make an ERIS claim as long as they meet that criteria. And therefore, if you're looking at companies where it's 30% of their trading and operating expenses are devoted to R&D, it makes sense that that would be higher. I don't think we're expecting such a huge change. There is a potential this is slightly skewed, but even when I took out some of the outlier claims that were much, much bigger, sort of in the order of over £1 million of qualifying expenditure, there was still a huge disparity between the two. So that seemed quite an interesting thing to pick out, that in general, ERIS claims are bigger. Interestingly, though, when we looked at the number of projects that are being described in detail for each of these claims, so again, overall, it's about 2.7 projects per claim, but there's a big, big difference between ERIS and RDEC here as well. So ERIS claims are actually contain fewer write-ups, so less than 2 on average per claim, rather than new RDEC, which is more in the kind of, I think it's 2.8 is the exact figure on that. So again, this was quite surprising where you've got the higher expenditure but fewer projects. But again, it's building up a picture of ERIS claims made by companies that spend a lot on R&D but don't spend that across a huge number of projects. So again, it's painting a picture of those kind of potentially well-funded startups, tech companies, that kind of thing, who can spend a lot on one or two really intensely R&D specific projects. Potentially that's all they're doing at this point in their growth cycle. It's hard to say, but generally speaking, it is interesting that they can have more than twice the expenditure with fewer projects. So just to give you an idea of what we mean by preparation time, what we're looking at here is the median time taken from someone creating that claim in WhisperClaims to it being finished. So being paid for, finalized, the documents being downloaded. This is median because actually we have quite a lot of clients who create the claim, add all the data and finish it within a couple of hours. And that's probably not very reflective of the time actually taken to gather the data. At the same time, at the other end, we have people who create the claim at the beginning of the claim year and then leave it sitting for 6-9 months while they're working through it. So I wanted to just look at what was the kind of medium, that middle value of where these things sat. And again, we did see a huge difference in the time taken to prepare ERIS claims versus new RDEC claims. So again, for all merged claims, they sit in the app for about 13 days before they're finished. Whereas an ERIS claim takes, I think it came out as just over 26 days it will sit there. where for an R&D claim, it's actually 10. So again, there's an order of magnitude difference here. So it's twice, it takes over twice as long for our customers to prepare an errors claim to a new R&D claim. And this is in the context of having fewer projects. So it's not that they are writing up twice as many projects and errors claims. There's one or two. So it does suggest that the requirements for an errors claim are the thing that's taking the time. So the need to look at connected companies, the need to really be careful about the R&D intensity calculation. Potentially there's other things around grace periods, PYE caps that all will affect an errors claim far more dramatically than an R&D claim. So generally speaking, yeah, we're seeing there's more money in them, there's fewer projects, and they're more complicated. They take longer. So again, I don't know if this is a particular surprise to anyone, but I think the actual overall difference is the thing that surprised us. I thought there would be a slight difference, but actually it's quite a big disparity between all of those figures. So other things we looked at just to see, again, whether there's any difference was geographical spread. And actually, again, there were big differences here we didn't expect to see. I will say for the Scotland one, so overall, the general geographical distribution of claims that goes through claims lines up fairly well with HMRC's distribution. Other than the Scottish ones, we get a lot more Scottish claims. We're based in Edinburgh. We're a Scottish company. So we are slightly enriched for Scottish claims over and above what HMRC would see. But the interesting thing is here, and again, it's not a huge number of claims. You're only looking at 170 claims. So some of these disparities might go away when we get more and more claims coming through. But there was a huge difference in where these claims were produced. So the vast majority of errors claims came from London. And again, there's we have to flag the same issue that HMRC have. This is registered address. So this might be companies registered in London, but based somewhere else in the UK. But the disparity is so huge, it can't be just accounted for in that. Also a lot more in the northeast, which is quite interesting. That's not an area that you would immediately think of as being deeply technical. And then we didn't see any errors claims at all in Yorkshire or the northwest. So there's or in Wales actually. So the general feel of there being a concentration of errors claims in more technical parts of the country where you expect to see more technical companies, and a concentration of R&D claims where you get the more kind of traditional manufacturing hubs and that kind of thing. So again, we are seeing a difference in where these claims are being claimed for. And the sector distribution, again, very similar to when you look at overall, very similar to HMRC's usual distribution. We can't look at most sectors because in the end, we had so few claims in those sectors as the data is probably fairly meaningless other than for the big four. But we do have a huge difference there where we got no ERIS construction claims whatsoever. All of the construction claims that went through the app were through RDEC. So again, that's an interesting one where we're potentially seeing larger, more established companies working in things like construction and manufacturing not meeting those ERIS criteria as readily as companies that are in professional, scientific and technical or IT. Possibly not hugely surprising, but there is, when you take that together with geographical distribution, our immediate thought was, is that a real difference that construction companies can't go for ERIS, that companies based in Wales can't claim ERIS? That seems really strange. And it flags the potential for there to be something in there more around, is it that companies, advisory companies based in London are more immediately used to doing merge scheme claims and therefore are more confident in producing ERIS claims with the amount of data that needs? Is there an issue around just advisor confidence in different areas, different sectors? Or is this actually a real difference where, I mean, it makes sense in some ways that construction companies wouldn't meet that criteria because a lot of what they do isn't R&D. So it raises maybe more questions than answers, but it is interesting to see this picture building again of ERIS claims being complicated, technical, concentrated in technical areas, and in traditionally kind of tech-heavy parts of the UK, and RDEC claims being smaller, less complicated, take less time to prepare, and concentrated in less technical sectors and less technical geographical areas. So I think I've just said all this without having my slide up, but yeah, so again, what we would look to understand next is, are these differences real, or are they related to the understanding of companies and advisors that specialize in certain sectors and certain areas? And that's something that we can understand over time as we get more and more data in, and obviously from asking the people actually working in this what their experience of it is. So I think we have another quick poll before I dive into the differences over the last 4 years.
We do, and this next poll is asking about, compared to the last few years, do you think that you're spending more time preparing claims? And the second question of this overall question is, what do you think is driving an increase in preparation time? Obviously, this is based on a slight assumption that from the data that we've been looking at, we were finding that preparation time does appear to be up. So that there's been a small assumption made there with that second question. So it'd be interesting to see what you all think. So we'll just give you 30 seconds or so to dive in and answer those questions. All right, already seeing much more and slightly more taking the lead at the top there, which is obviously what we were anticipating, what we would expect to see. Let's give you another 5 or 10 seconds to go, and then we'll end the poll and share the results there. Evidence gathering as the reason is coming up quite strong as well. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and I'll end it and share the results. There we go.
Yeah, so again, that's slightly relieved that that's come out as what we'd expect. That, yeah, the majority of people are finding they're spending a lot more time. Some are slightly more, but most people are spending more time preparing claims, which makes sense. If nothing else, and I'll show you some data about this as it changes over time, a new set of rules will always mean that the claims take a bit longer. But when coupled with the answer to the second, the evidence gathering has become a much bigger burden. Now, as I say, it's things like having to have all the details about any and all connected companies, I think is a huge thing for companies to have to suddenly think about. The requirements around EPWs and subcontractors and the overseas rules around that. Obviously, it has got, much as this is a simplification, things have got more complicated in terms of what you've got to understand, what you've got to gather. It's interesting that obviously only a couple of people have said that the additional information form drives that increase in preparation time. And again, some data on that, but the impression that we've got is that when it first came out, obviously there was a huge amount more time required, and people have got used to that over time. It's become just embedded in the process. And again, it's interesting, that's kind of what we'd expect to see. And obviously, quite a few people saying it's just they're more cautious generally. And I think that, again, is what we've seen, that people just want to absolutely dot their I's, cross their T's, anticipate any and all questions HMRC might have. So again, it's really good that the data is reflecting kind of people's lived experience of all of this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen. I'll just stop sharing. Yeah, the question is like, does the additional time become the new normal? We'll start.
Yeah.
Got some stuff to tell us
about. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just going to now dive into actually looking at, again, what I find more interesting, you guys might not, actually how the same stats that we just showed you about the merged, the ERIS versus RDEC, how that has, what the trend in that over the past 4 years has been. So just to clarify what the 2 lines on the graph mean, so we're going to look at this in 2 ways all the way through. What we can look at when we look at the data is there's 2 different ways to look at it. You can look at claims that were processed in a particular year. So we're looking at claims processed in 23, 24, 25, 26. But obviously, you also have claims that have a year end in that time and thus are subject to the different rules as they've come in. So the trends are slightly different depending whether you're looking at when they were processed or for what year end they were done. So obviously, you could potentially have been processing a claim for year end in 2023 into 2025. So just to be clear, that's kind of, we're looking at things in 2 different ways, and it kind of shows the impact of some of the changes and that kind of thing. So fundamentally, what we have seen over the last 4 years, if you look at when claims were processed, and even with some exceptions, their year end, a general gradual increase in qualifying expenditure over all claims going through our system. Now, this makes sense because overall, what we know from HMRC's information is that the number of small claims has reduced disproportionate to the rest of the claims. We know that the number of claims being processed is reduced by 50%, the number of smaller end claims is reduced even more than that. So it makes sense that then statistically, overall, the average would go up. So this makes sense with what we've seen from HMRC. When you look at year ends, though, it's quite interesting that we are seeing a big peak in 2024, and then that's come down over 25, 26. So that's potentially companies that have had inquiries, so had higher R&D expenditure in the earlier years, have then reduced that down for 25 and are now cautiously coming back. It might be, obviously, it's crashed down for FY 2025 year ends because those would be the ones under the new merge scheme, and they were having to exclude subcontractor costs. Potentially, companies are excluding all of their subcontractor costs rather than having to work out whether it fits some of the overseas rules, that kind of thing. So we've definitely seen a sudden downward trend and then coming back up again as the merge scheme rules have impacted claim years. So it'll be interesting to see whether that trend continues, whether we see it kind of balancing out and becoming more stable. But it's definitely been an increase over the last few years. Interesting, these lines are nicely aligned. So again, we're looking at just a number of projects and how much detail. So I will say that one of the reasons that there's such a big jump between 23 and 24 is obviously the AIF was introduced halfway through 23. So prior to that, we still had some of our clients that would put no detailed project write-ups, not many, but we still had some. And obviously then they were forced to do it. So the data for 2023 is a little bit less reliable than everything else. But in general, there's been a trend towards writing up more projects, including more data. And I think this is interesting because I don't think, again, so we've lost some of the smaller end of the scheme, so that could account for some of this change in terms of the more projects, bigger claims have more projects. I think it's also that when the AIF was first introduced, we did see quite a lot of people kind of lumping all the R&D together into one project to save time, to make it more straightforward to prepare, and people have realized that that doesn't fly with HMRC through their compliance activity. So we have seen that again, gradual increase over the last 4 years, both year end and when they were paid, into kind of writing up more, including more. And I think that is more a reaction to HMRC's compliance activity than anything to do with changes to the rules or anything like that. But it is good to see people including more data, including more projects, all that kind of thing. So this was an interesting one for me. So as I was saying, what we felt we had seen and what this data supports. So again, so the red line is the year that these claims were actually processed. So we saw a peak in 2023 and a gradual decline towards 2025. So that is definitely the response of people to the introduction of the AIF. Suddenly claims were taking a lot longer. It's reduced down to 2025 and then it's shot back up again. So for me, what this data says is that, yep, people definitely had a response to the AIF and that increased the time. Everyone got used to it. And now suddenly the new merge scheme, the complexities of that, just learning more guidance, more rules, all that kind of thing has meant the time has shot up. When you look at the year end, again, it's interesting, 2024 is basically no difference. And again, so 2025 claims, 2026 claims, there's been a gradual increase. So even the ones that were produced in 2020 for 2025 financial year ends, and the 26 ones have actually increased it further. So people are finding over time that merge scheme claims are more complicated, they're harder to put together. So we are seeing that gradual increase. And I'm really glad that everyone's kind of responses reflected that. So that was really good. So again, preparation time increasing for obvious reasons, and it's really good to see it reflected in the data. So I actually put this one in because there's not a huge amount to talk about with the geographical spread. Interestingly, we've had no merge scheme claims from Northern Ireland come through yet, which is unusual. You can see it's not a huge proportion of the claims that go through Whisper, but it's not an insignificant number either. And this almost certainly reflects how late the Northern Irish ERIS rules and guidance was published compared to everything else. And I think probably reflects a little bit of trepidation on the part of advisors. Like, it is a lot more complicated to produce a claim for Northern Ireland. You've got to be checking a lot more things. So it's interesting that those are taking much, much longer to come through. So we're just looking at pre-merge versus merged here. We're not looking at individual claim years because honestly, there wasn't a huge amount of difference, and also it's a really difficult graph to talk to when it's got that much data in it. We've seen a wee bit of a drop increase in claims coming through in some areas, but really the data lines up. We haven't seen a huge shift pre-merge to merge in terms of where the claims are coming from, other than obviously the Northern Ireland thing. This one, again, I know it's horrible. I know it's really small to see. The point of this one was to really show that what we haven't seen over the last 4 years is a huge switch in sector, which we actually did expect to see. We expected to see a reduction in claims for hospitality, for example, as HMRC's compliance activity increased, and a move towards more technical, more construction, that kind of thing. The more technical end, the ones you'd expect to see claims coming from. And actually we didn't. So I have to admit, we gave ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back here, showing that we are working with people who weren't putting through a huge number of claims for non-technical sectors. So the only big change over time was in other service activities. You can see that in 2023, it was quite a high percentage, and that's dropped down completely. My gut says that is people actually updating the SIC code for their company to something more specific than just one of the other service activity SIC codes. What we used to see a lot of was, businesses not otherwise classified, and we're seeing a big shift away from that. We do flag it. Obviously, anyone that uses WhisperClaims know that that's something we flag in our risk review of, like, this has a non-technical SIC code, and we know that people will go away and update it to make sure that it's more reflective of what the company actually does. But yeah, we're not seeing a huge move, as I say, a huge change from hospitality and that back into more technical sectors. So again, that was really good. And it also does, again, this data is probably not as reflective of the sector as a whole as the rest of the data we showed, because of the nature of the people we work with and the way that we vet our clients. We've probably got fewer, hopefully, far fewer clients that would push through borderline claims in non-technical sectors. So interesting to see, even if there's not a huge amount of change to observe. So yeah, overall, we are seeing behavioural and process changes in claim preparation, which I'm sure would please HMRC. So people are putting in more detail, they're taking longer over it. They're generally, processes have got more robust. They must have to be doing all those different things, but we're not seeing a major change in geographical spread or sector distribution. So again, claims are coming from similar companies in similar areas, similar sectors, but they're taking longer, and people are putting, I wouldn't say more effort, I think that's an unfair thing, but they are taking more time over it and dotting their I's, crossing their T's, and making sure everything is as accurate as it can possibly be. And I think we have one last poll to do before we get to the Q&A section.
We do. And again, this is just reflective of, oh, sorry. I think that's there. Hope there's that.
Yeah, that's right now.
Some of the information that Jen's just been showing about, risk and types of clients that you might want to work with. It'd be really interesting just to hear from you guys. Have you become more selective about the types of claims that you're looking to support? And then the follow-up to that is, are there any claim types that give you like a huge amount of pause under the new regime, under the new conditions? What does that potentially look like? As with the previous ones, I'll just give you 20 seconds or so just to get your thoughts together. Be really interesting to see what you think or what your experiences are. The prevailing answers to the first question so far are significantly more selective and slightly more, which is good to see. And software and construction so far, the ones that give everyone greatest pause. Oh, and first-time claimants. I'll give you another 5 seconds or so, and then I'll end the poll. Okie dokes, let me just share. Jen, I'm sure you've got some things to say. Here we go.
Yeah, no, I mean, that top one, I'm not in any way surprised. That lines up with the data, that lines up with everything we've heard from people. And I think it's also interesting to think of this alongside what the other feedback we've been getting from a lot of our clients is that claimants themselves are self-excluding. So not only are people being more selective about the kind of companies they work with, which I think is a great thing to see, companies themselves, so the claimant companies, are backing away from doing this because they have either been scared or eligible but have been scared off by everything that's gone over the last few years, or are realizing that they shouldn't be doing this in the first place. And I think that it does, much as it's had a very interesting and difficult impact on the sector itself and those that work in it, overall, it is suggesting that the sector is becoming healthier, for want of a better word. We're seeing fewer claims for non-technical sectors done by less selective advisors and that kind of thing. So overall, it seems really positive. And I'm not in any way surprised that people are worried about software and construction claims. We know that those are two of the sectors that HMRC absolutely went after. Same with first-time claims. So I think I'm not surprised. I think we need to encourage people that those claims are still valid. They should still be doing them, but people should be pausing and double checking, because I think these are, especially software claims, are something that for many years sailed through without any questions. And now people are realizing that a lot of the software claims that went through probably shouldn't have been submitted. So pausing is a good thing, taking the time to actually check that advances have been made, uncertainties have been overcome, that kind of thing. It is almost sad that the first time claimant one is something that gives you pause, because it is difficult now, and I understand that HMRC go after it. And again, I would be concerned about working with a client that's doing this for the first time, but there's still legitimate claims and people need support. So hopefully when people say it gives you pause, it doesn't stop you doing it, but it does mean that you need, yes, and make sure again that those processes and what's the word? We'll just stick with processes. Everything is robust as it can be, and everything is being done to absolutely in line with what HMRC would want to see. So all really good responses. So thanks to everyone who did answer the polls. That was really good.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing that now. Thanks, everyone. Really useful.
So I'm just going to hand to Suze very briefly before we jump into the Q&A section.
Thanks, Jen. So just to give you all a few minutes to gather your thoughts, if you've got any questions for us. Honestly, nothing's off the table. Please do feel free to ask us whatever you like, based on the content, obviously, of today's webinar. And if anybody has already heard about us or would like to have a chat to us about our software and support that we offer, accountants and advisors would be really delighted to speak to you. The slide just there is just an illustration of the trial that we offer. So when we speak to new customers, new prospects who are looking to become a customer, we always like to give them the opportunity to have a 360 view of what they're subscribing to. So a trial looks like a month's free subscription. You get one report download for free. We also give you a free claim review, and you also get access immediately to our unlimited advice line supports. Overall, the value of that in a given month would be £975 plus VAT, just to give you an idea of the great value that you're getting within that trial period. And of course, there's no obligation after a trial to subscribe. If you're not ready, it's not for you, you don't have the pipeline there, or you just need some time to have a think about things. So if anybody is interested today in having a chat to us, please do feel free to get in touch after the webinar today. Of course, we will be sending a recording of today's session as well as a follow-up. So all of the contact details, if you're struggling, will be there. Just while we're waiting for anyone to drop any questions in the Q&A box, I can stick some our email address there as well. Oh, we've got a question.
Put that out there. Yeah.
I'll grab that and then I'll put contact details in. From Evie, thank you, Evie. Do you know the reasons why software claims are going into inquiry more?
I mean, obviously, HMRC have never stated the reasons. They definitely targeted that as a sector. We could tell from just the general feedback we were getting from a lot of clients. It makes sense because, as I say, software claims are seen as almost untouchable for quite a long time. HMRC didn't have in-house software expertise as much as they needed to. So there were a lot of software claims going through that, when you look at a strict reading of the guidance, shouldn't have been. So I think it's been a kind of a long overdue correction more than anything else. There were a lot of claims we saw over the years for companies installing software systems rather than developing new ones. A lot of claims for companies who were maybe not actually software developers, so they didn't have the competent professional argument became a thing. And a lot of claims, even for software companies, where people were claiming for doing things that were actually, they didn't meet the definition. They weren't advancing software science. They weren't really overcoming uncertainties. They were developing new features and functionality without actually making the underlying advances that would make the claim eligible. So I think that's the main thing, is they had been left alone for so long, it needed that slight overcorrection that HMRC gave it. And I think now what we might see when HMRC publish their stats in September is a drop off a little bit in claims from that sector because fundamentally a lot of the work that software companies do these days isn't eligible. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond to AI claims and AI produced software, because again, people who are, and I hate this term, but vibe coding aren't software development experts. They couldn't necessarily tell you that whether the software that they've produced using AI advances software science or not, or has uncertainties. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects, again, HMRC's attitude to software claims. But I hope that answers the question. It's a bit of a rambling one, but yeah, it's been a historical problem, oversight on HMRC's part in R&D tax relief.
Really useful, Jen. Thanks. Great question, Evie. Just give you a couple of seconds more if anybody's furiously typing a question there. And while you are, if you are, I'd just be really interested. I don't know if anyone wants to drop a message in the comments. Confidence has been a huge theme throughout the last 12 months, at least, with the conversations that we've been having. And I'd just be really interested if anybody has any idea what would increase any confidence. If for those of you specifically maybe that answered in the poll that, you know, confidence was maybe a bit lower. I know some of you are still remaining and retaining your confidence. It would be interesting to hear if anybody's got anything that they'd like to share, just because, as I said, it's definitely a challenge that we've been hearing about a lot on the ground. Obviously, so much change is something that is always going to have an impact and a blow to confidence. Change is never nice, and there's just been so much of it in the last few years. But yeah, if anybody wants to say anything, no, that's okay. Okay, well, there are no more questions, and we'd love for you to get a bit of your lunch break back. We're so delighted and grateful for those of you that have joined us today. So thank you. Thank you, Jen, so much. That was really interesting. And as I said, we will be following up with a recording if anybody wants to watch back or have another listen at some point, or if you didn't manage to stay all the way through. So thank you again. We hope to hear from you soon, and we look forward to you joining us in our next event. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, Jen.